So far, we have proven that the records of the Muslim conquest of Iraq conflict with the standard Islamic narrative itself. So let us continue to take our deep dive into the details of this war and what it means for the traditional date of Muhammad's death. As we continue with our discussions concerning some contradictions related to early Islamic conquest battles, if you wish, and also in particular the battle of the Apostates or the apostasy wars. Now, in the past few episodes, we covered at least 3 of 7 battles, and you're going to see on the screen the map that basically lists all of these battles. So we covered, I believe, 3 of those, number 1, number 2, and number 3. Today, I'm assuming we're going to jump into number 4, and that's the Battle of Walaja. And we'll have our brother Mel here unpack to us also his findings concerning the historicity of that battle, the dating as opposed or compared to the standard Islamic narrative.
Yeah, so I suppose the key thing with each of these battles, we have distinct evidence for each one. Saif ibn Umar tells us about these battles and tells us who the Persian leaders were. And so poor Shariati has looked at the names of these leaders, turned to the Iranian sources, and found out the dates that these leaders were alive. And that tells us really when these battles would have occurred. It certainly gives us the earliest and latest date that you can pen for these battles. Obviously, if a leader has died in a certain year, it's impossible for that leader then to appear 3 years later in a battle. So these are kind of key. So let's start with the first battle today, which is the Battle of Walaja. So the Sen, like with the other battles, places it in 633 AD. Poor Shariati says, in the Battle of Walaja, described next and placed among the wars taking place in 12 AH, the news of the defeat and murder of Karen reached Ardashir III. Again, while the Sen places it in 633 AD, the sources indicate it really happened sometime between 629 and 630 AD. Okay, so not so good so far. So we have a massive discrepancy between the dating of the Sen, which is put at 633, and as we saw, the dating here 629 to 630, which is indicated by the reign of Ardashir III. So we're going to move on now to the Battle of Ulays. Again, stated by the Sen as 12 AH. What does the Iranian sources tell us? So poor Shariati says, with the narrative of the war of the Battle of Ulays, which is still taking place in the year 12 of Hijra, according to Saif, we're given further significant internal Sasanian chronological indicators. The child Ardashir III supposedly wrote to this spokesman for the Persians and ordered him to go forth in order to engage the Arabs. Bahman Yad Huyi, however, disobeyed Ardashir III's orders and sent Jaban in his stead, ordering him to not engage the enemy until he returned. So what this indicates, as we'll see in a moment, is that the battle actually occurred in April 630 and not in 633 AD. So just going to read here from poor Shariati. She says, when Bahman hurried back to the capital because the news had reached him that Ardashir III was sick, therefore, as one of the leaders of the Parsik, he was in fact returning to the capital to aid Sharvaraz and the Nimruzi faction in toppling the child king. Hence, based on the Sasanian chronological indicators, the Battle of Ulays took place at the time when Sharvaraz had mutinied and was about to take over Ctesiphon in his bid for power, that is around April 630. So we've got a lot of indicators here with all the different figures, particularly Sharvaraz and Ardashir III. You know, he was sick and about to die. So we can be very precise that it's April 630 and not 3 years later, 633. Mm-hmm. So that's it from me today. So that's another indicator that there is something massively wrong with the standard Islamic narrative.
Absolutely. And when you were doing this research, did you even test it with other researches beside the two sources that you were looking at? And how does this correlate to any of your previous research concerning any of the other datings of other events?
Yeah. So the common theme actually over the past 2 or 3 years is there was this consistent feeling that the dating of so many of the events mentioned by the standard Islamic narrative were about 4 years off. And so a large part of it is the mystery of why is it 4 years off? And one of the suggestions was it's got something to do with the length of the Islamic year. And I thought maybe that's what skewed it, from the Anno Domini. But actually that didn't quite fit the facts, because then surely all of the dates would have been out, even like say in this 720s or the 820s, that all of this should be pushed up. But just specifically these first key events seem to be out by 4 years.
Yeah.
So I would say, yes, it kind of tallies really well. As we'll see a little bit later, I've done an experiment really with the dates that was given by Saif. And so I figured, well, what if we take a different date for the Hijra, or at least the year of the Arab, as it was originally called, because the Arabs who rebelled didn't call their founding date the year of the Hijra initially. They called it simply the year of the Arab.
Mm-hmm.
Once we use the term year of the Hijra, we're already buying into the standard Islamic narrative, because that's a loaded term, as the founding year was nothing to do with Muhammad's journey between Mecca and Medina. It had all to do with the fact that they went out from their home base and started invading different areas around Arabia, Syria, and Iraq. That was the real starting point. And so I think the dating is lining up pretty well. There's something else I wanted to mention, which I think is particularly good about Saif's account, and is something that a lot of people don't get, is that we often think of the Persians as being this big superpower and it was all unified. But what Saif indicates is that there were factions among the Persians. There were the Parsik, which are the Sasanians, and there was the Parthians. Now, the Parthians were living up in the northern part of Iran. They were basically under the shadow of the Sasanians for 4 or 5 centuries, and they were eager to get power again. And during the key years of 628 to 632, this was a time where Khosrow had died, 628, and that's an interesting point. He dies, and basically the Persians were divided about who should take over. Many of Khosrow's descendants were killed off by his enemies, and so there wasn't a clear front runner. Now, what I find really interesting, if we examine the standard Islamic narrative, there's too many coincidences in this story, because first of all, you have a leader called Khosrow who dies in 628, and what happens after he dies? There is chaos. What does that remind you of? Well, for me, it reminds me of the story of Muhammad dies, and then there's chaos afterwards.
Right.
So the Ridda Wars are about, that there's a dispute, there's factions, there are people fighting against each other. And yet, historically, what we see is that 628, the Persian leader dies, and then there's these factions. Now, there is a religious dimension to these factions, because the Parthians believed in Mithraism, whereas the Sasanians were Zoroastrians. And so there is a difference of faith between the two, as well as a political difference of opinion. And so for me, I don't believe in coincidences. To me, that would indicate that somehow that part of the story got changed in retelling, and somehow that got introduced into the standard Islamic narrative. But now it's not Khosrow that dies, but Muhammad dies. And if you remember in the last episode, I was suggesting that it feels like that Muhammad would have had to die around 628, 627, if you remember back.
Right.
And yet now we're indicating today that Hustro is the one who died in 628. And then there's chaos afterwards. So it's quite interesting.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you're aware of this, but I'm going to just throw it out there. You know that there is a controversy about the year when Muhammad was born. And it's off by 4 years, by the way, if that tells you anything. So it's allegedly that Muhammad either was born 4 years earlier, or somehow he miraculously, as a fetus, stayed in his mother's womb for 4 years and was born later. So this 4 is becoming more and more a theme now. And, it seemed like our, wonderful Muslim friends who are researchers need to revisit the dating and start all over again.
That's interesting because as we're going to see later, if there was a change in their dating system by 4 years, then they're going to have to cover up the cracks. They're going to have to come up with why the dating is now different. So, they're going to have to change when he died. They're going to also have to change when he was born. So that may be part of the narrative. Yeah, so that's an excellent point.
Yep. All right, my brother. Well, what are we going to basically go over next time?
So we're going to look at a few more battles. We're going to check the dating. We're going to see what the evidence is. And we're going to actually see that all of these datings that we have, the battles, are not one-offs. It's actually consistently wrong and consistently out by 4 years. Again, as I said earlier, I don't believe in coincidences. There has to be an explanation for why all of these dates are out by pretty much the same number of years. And we're going to be eventually looking at what the explanation for that is.
Absolutely. Thank you as always, and thank you everyone for watching. This is Al Fadi, over and out. God bless. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. And ring the bell so you will be notified when we release new content. Our mission is to reach Muslims with the gospel of Jesus Christ and help Christians engage with their Muslim neighbors. If you want to join us in this life-changing work, please support us on patreon.com/Sira International, or just click on the link below.